Hello and welcome to another edition of the China in Africa podcast. I'm Eric Olander, and as always, I'm joined by Cobus van Staden at Wits University in Johannesburg, South Africa. A very good afternoon to you, Cobus.
Good afternoon.
Cobus, if memory serves me correctly from the last time I was at Wits University, Wits is one of the many universities in Africa that receives delegations of foreign students who come from all over the world, most notably probably from the United States and Europe. We're doing a study abroad, summer abroad. These overseas educational exchanges are in fact not new at all. And so it's something that people have been doing for a long time. Students, both in high school and college, have been doing up and down the continent. In fact, when I was at UC Berkeley as a student, I almost went to the University of Nairobi in Kenya to do a summer abroad. And so while it's really common practice, in fact, probably a big moneymaker for a number of African universities to host exchanges from overseas, the Chinese, for the most part, haven't done that. And in part because the Chinese educational system has been one that has been focused mainly on testing and grades. And so the thought of sending children abroad to study and learn about cultures and languages really just goes completely counter to the instincts that most parents have in terms of what it takes to get into a Chinese university. However, now, as the trend is shifting for many Chinese to study in other parts of the world, most notably the United States, picking up these experiences in places like Africa is becoming increasingly important.
So what you're seeing more and more is an increasing number of Chinese students spending time in Africa, especially in between high school and college, trying to do good for Africans while also trying to improve their own resumes and college application essays.
Yeah, and one of the programs that's doing that is the China Ghana Changemaker Program, which is run by one of the application consulting firms AIC, designed to help Chinese students get into U.S. universities. We are thrilled to have on the line from Beijing the co-founder of the China Ghana Changemaker Program, Francis Miller. A very good evening to you, Francis.
Thank you, Eric and Cobus. Thanks for having me on your show.
Well, welcome to the program. We're very excited to have you. You have just started this program. You've finished the first year where you take 7 high school students and you bring them to what is, from the PowerPoint slide that you have, is an absolutely phenomenal program where you're giving them kind of exposure to different ideas, where they do preparation before they go to Ghana, then they are working in classrooms, they get to present to the Chinese embassy. It just sounds like an amazing program. Why don't you just kind of set it up for us as to what is the China Ghana Changemaker Program and kind of explain what are some of the activities that the students do?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So the China Ghana Changemaker Program is essentially boiled down to its essence a 2.5-week experience in Ghana for Chinese high school students to kind of really get a genuine cultural exchange experience, but not only kind of a traditional voluntourism trip. We really wanted to focus this trip on the changemaker component. So the trip itself, it actually began before we arrived in Ghana. We walked our students through a month-long teacher training program to prepare them to go into a classroom in a rural school in Heritage Academy, where our students taught 4 different classes. Our students also prepared for the program by attending a forum in Beijing at the Columbia University, Columbia Global Centers, Beijing. The forum itself was titled Bridging Cultures, Education, and Entrepreneurship on a Global Stage. So before our students even arrived in Ghana, they had a chance to grapple with some of these ideas surrounding education, international education in particular, as well as entrepreneurship and how that is helping to exchange ideas in tech and particularly between China and Africa. Arriving in Ghana, our students spent the morning teaching 3 periods of middle school students. The 4 classes that they taught were Wuzi, also known as 5 in a row, as well as public speaking, traditional Chinese art and history, and science, especially physics experiments. In the afternoons, our students, we taught them a 2-week-long course in social entrepreneurship. So our students were in classroom with Ghanaian students at the school. So Ghanaian high school students, in Ghanaian terms, that's SHS2, so secondary high school level 2 students in Ghana. So we concluded the program with a business pitch competition at the school. And our students also went on, after the conclusion of the program at the school, to deliver their business pitches at the Chinese embassy in Accra.
So just to circle back a little bit, you mentioned that one of the subjects that the students teach is rote. I wonder if you could tell us what that is for people who aren't immersed in Chinese culture, and why that is being taught.
Sure. Well, honestly, it was being taught because the students wanted to teach that. We gave the students a lot of freedom in choosing the academic material that they wanted to teach in their classes. And that was a game that 2 of our students were really passionate about. Particularly, they were interested in teaching math. But then we were challenging students to think of fun and engaging ways for them to deliver academic content, and Wuziqi came up as a fun and interesting activity for a class. So it seemed like a good way to do that. Wuziqi itself, it's a 19 by 19 board game, and so it's played with white and black pieces. And so usually, white goes first, and whoever ends up with 5 pieces of their color in a row first wins. So our Chinese students were teaching. They were teaching the Ghanaian Ghanaian middle school students strategies to play with the Wuziqi, and also how to say some of the moves and rules and some of the vocabulary in Chinese as well.
And very quickly, how old are the 7 students, the Chinese students that go? What age are we talking about?
We had all ages in high school. So we had a rising 9th grade student, and we also had rising seniors.
And what's that age-wise? 13, 14, 15, 16, 17?
Oh, sorry. Yes, age-wise, we had one 15-year-old, and the rest were 16, 17, 18.
Okay. I mean, I think it's just absolutely fantastic to have these kind of cross-cultural mixings. And I really celebrate, and this is something that I've devoted a big part of my own life to doing as somebody who studied in China, did a degree in China, lived in Africa. So I love it when I see young people do this. I just want to play a little bit of the devil's advocate here, and because you brought up this issue of the voluntourism. And AIC is an application consulting service, which is one of the many services in Beijing and Shanghai that is designed to help students kind of get into U.S. universities. And so I'm really, I'm very cynical about this idea of going to another part of the world to help other people. Particularly here in Vietnam, where I live, voluntourism is a very big industry. And it's really an industry where mostly white people come from Europe and America, and they come on a 2-week holiday, and they go to an orphanage, and they think they're actually doing something, or they build a house in the Mekong Delta, and they think they're really doing something, when in fact, the people who work in these organizations, they tear down the houses that the white people made, and they actually put up proper ones because the white people don't know how to do this. In the orphanages, what child benefits from having, strange adults coming through every 2 weeks, and then they just leave again? And so I guess, and I've railed on the Peace Corps for a very long time on this program, because I argue that the Peace Corps' main purpose is not to help other people, but to help the students and the young people who participate in Peace Corps, the Americans. It does very little, in my view, for other people. So I guess I'm just wondering, when I see the motivations of AIC, which is to help these students kind of have a more diverse, flowery, wonderful resume and experience, which I think is great because that does help them get into universities. I just question the motivations of the students. That are they really going to do something interesting, or are they going from pressure from their parents and the pressure to get into UC Berkeley, Columbia, Harvard, because they really need something to stand apart from the other 300,000 Chinese students that are also applying, who do cello, who all have 4.0s on their resumes, on their grades, who all have the same kind of profile. And this is just another way to get a different profile. So how do you respond to the cynic in me that kind of questions the motivations of this?
That's a great question. And actually, that's something that from the very outset of the proposal for this program that we had to grapple with. Because, like you said, there are lots of programs, not just all over the world. In China, there are lots of programs. Every year, actually, I work with students who, on their activity list, they put programs exactly like what you just described, where they're very shallow volunteer experiences that are purely for resume building that do not actually affect any sort of sustainable, lasting change. And so, we kind of had we kind of cheated in that respect with designing this program because I had already been to the school previously to do work there, and from the outset, we worked very closely with our hosts in Ghana to really design a program that would bring benefits, and not just to the Chinese students who are going, but also to their Ghanaian students in the middle school, and also to their high school classmates who are designing the business plans with them. So in terms of the benefits, the lasting benefits that this program will be able to deliver for the school, I would name a couple of big things. One is just purely the curriculum and this idea of creating not just an entrepreneurship program, but specifically a social entrepreneurship program. Creating a business program with values. Something that we did at the conclusion of the program was we sponsored a trip for not just our students, not just our Chinese changemakers, but also for our Ghanaian changemakers as well on the business teams to travel to Ashesi University in Accra. And the purpose of that trip was, and it was a college visit for the Ghanaian students, but also for the Chinese students to hear about entrepreneurship programs that are existing in Africa. And one of the things that Ashesi University does is that it requires students to actually to take entrepreneurship classes, and it's one of the few universities in the world to do that. And so by having our program in entrepreneurship, by forcing our students to go out into their communities, both the Ghanaian and Chinese students, to do research, to interact with electricians and pastors and taxi drivers, and to have conversations with fruit sellers on the side of the street about where their income comes from, to talk about how money is spent, how does the rainy season affect crops, and to use that information in business pitches to come up with ideas to solve problems. That exchange, that was just the beginning of something while we were at the school. But then to see the programs at Ashesi University, it kind of lit a light bulb in the heads of both our Chinese and Ghanaian changemakers. It showed them what was possible. And after we left, everybody on Ghana is basically on Facebook, on Facebook mobile chat, and the chat messages that we were receiving from the students and from the teachers at the school were just unbelievable. They spoke about this energy that was on campus after we left, how there was so much enthusiasm, and how they were attracting alumni back to the school to deliver their experiences and to give back. And the change that was from our visit was, I think, and part of it was delivering this experience for our Chinese students to put volunteer teaching on their resume, and to give them a business idea that maybe they could present at a conference or a business competition, but also to show something, show that there's a greater there's a world beyond the village, that there is so much is possible with the right ideas and the right awareness, and the ideas that we were able to bring.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I was, kind of like, it sounds incredibly interesting, but right at the moment, I'm finding it a little bit difficult to understand how the Ghanaian students are involved. Like, it sounds like they are being taught, certain kind of Ghanaian students are being taught as part of volunteer teaching, and yet also some Ghanaian students are actually involved in the social entrepreneurship design programs. Like, how does the program break down from the Ghanaian side?
Yes. So every summer, Heritage Academy runs a summer school for both middle and high school students. And so our Chinese high school change makers were delivering classes as teachers to middle school students at Heritage Academy in the morning. In the afternoon, our Chinese change makers then took classes together with a group of high school students at Heritage Academy in social entrepreneurship. So there are two very distinct programs, one a volunteer teaching component and one taking entrepreneurship classes.
Talk to me a little bit about who the children are, the young Chinese are, and their profile. I mean, you talked about that they're from 15 to about 17 years old. They're high school students. Typically Chinese families don't give a lot of autonomy to students, to their children. The children follow the guidance of the parents, and so I'm wondering where's the motivation come to do this program? Does it come from the young person who says, "Mom, Dad, I want to go to Africa to go to Ghana," or is this from the parents who are oftentimes orchestrating or engineering to the minutest detail of what the children do to get into a good university? What's the politics of that in terms of how the children come to you?
Actually, that's a really good question. From the very beginning, that was actually something that we were most worried about, was that there would be nobody interested in our program, simply because Chinese parents are very demanding, and they do scrutinize and very carefully plan out activities for their children. And Africa, to a lot of Chinese parents, it seems like it's a monolithic place. It's a lot of war and disease, and we had 26 prospective students for the program, and a lot of them made the decision not to go because of various reasons, some of which were stereotypes about how Africa is an unsafe place. In terms of actually, why students, what convinced these students to participate in our program, we had 5 students who were coming to us from U.S. boarding schools. So 2 students were domestic Chinese students, and I think what that really speaks to is that the Chinese students of ours who were in U.S. boarding schools, a lot of them had already been on international service programs. We had one student of ours who had been on a program to Guatemala to look at fair trade practices, for example, who was interested in actually, while she was in Ghana, learning about chocolate manufacturing. Or rather, cocoa bean production. And so for these students who are with us, a lot of what they were seeking to get out of the trip was a combination of what they and their parents were hoping to get out of the trip was really something that would be different, something that would set them apart on their resume. And quite frankly, I looked for a long time. I don't think there are any programs that combine both a volunteer teaching experience with a rigorous academic experience in social entrepreneurship quite like we were able to do this past summer.
And from the African side, the African Changemaker students, what are their profile? Are they similarly also from both diaspora and African background, or are they mostly from Africa? And also, are some of them also trying to use this experience of trying to get into U.S. universities?
Yeah, so all the students that attended this program were all from the local village. So a lot of them come from families that are living on a couple of dollars a day. Most of the students have grown up going to Heritage Academy. A little bit about Heritage Academy itself. It was started by one of my high school teachers from Westtown School named Kwesi Funsun. And so he started the school as a member of the village community in rural Ghana in Bremen, Essiam, as a way to provide for the community a very low-cost alternative education. And what the students are experiencing at Heritage Academy is a little bit different from other schools in Ghana. In Ghana, the educational system is very much about it's very traditional British education. So a lot of memorization, a lot of focus on math and science and English. A lot of rote memorization of English text. And at Heritage Academy, there are a couple of different things. Their primary values, knowledge and integrity, are lived out through a couple of different policies that they have, among which there's no corporal punishment at Heritage Academy. They have now entrepreneurship is a required part of their high school curriculum. They encourage students to ask questions, discussion. They have small class sizes. Most of the students are on scholarship. I'm not exactly sure what the figure is, but I think it's more than 90% of the students at Heritage Academy don't pay for anything, including the tuition, uniform, food, and so forth. So, and the students specifically who were attending our program, they were at the summer school program simply because they wanted to be there, and they're from the area and truly represented were representative of that region and hoping to be part of this program for their first time.
Cobus, I have to say that I have very mixed feelings about study abroad programs. Not just what we've heard today, but also just in general. The U.S. universities, when they send these students abroad, they send these big groups of kids, sometimes from many different universities clustered together, 30, 40, 50, even 100. They go to a university somewhere. They all kind of stick together. They don't really break out. They don't learn the local language. They don't immerse themselves in the culture. And it's kind of ridiculous, the whole thing. And then in Africa, I worry a little bit because it fosters this idea of, again, Africa is the victim. We're there to help. I'm always skeptical of when a 16-year-old from any country is teaching another child. I mean, it just creates this weird kind of imbalance. Now, that's the negative side. The positive side of what Francis and AIC are doing is that I love the fact that they're exposing young people to this big, broader world, as he said. I think that's so critical in the fact that it's small and it's dynamic and it's kind of immersive. So it's a complicated issue, and Francis brought up this question of the voluntourism as well, which is, has a lot of unintended consequences that can sometimes warp an experience. So, what's your thought, Cobus, as you kind of reflect on what we've heard?
Well, it certainly sounds like a very innovative and interesting program, and I'm sure it's incredibly exciting and valuable on the personal level. As my questions have shown, I did tend to wonder from an African side, what the role of African students are in this, and and how. What they're getting out of it, and obviously, Francis, you have laid that out, in quite a lot of detail, and it sounds very interesting, and a lot of it sounds very like it would broaden some of African students' world, for example, to come face to face with some formal education on Chinese history and Chinese art, for example. What I'm wondering, though, is whether, and I'd love to actually hear what you say about that as well, is to which extent is this building a bridge for Chinese students to the U.S. via African students, and to which extent is it building a bridge for African students somewhere?
That's a great question. So I guess just really quickly, both the Chinese students who attended our program, as well as some of the Ghanaian students who are in our program, will be applying to U.S. universities. So every year, Heritage Academy does have many of its students apply to U.S. universities with mixed results. But it is a goal of theirs to be able to use these experiences with their students to send their students to abroad, to not just the United States, but the UK as well. And in terms of the experience, what it provided for both the Chinese and Ghanaian students together. That might maybe be best. Maybe it'd be best if I gave an example of one of the business ideas that the students came up with together. And so in the business competition, we had 3 teams, and so they each tackled a different problem. One of the teams, in the 2 weeks that we were there, we spent a lot of time kind of wandering around through the villages, taking observations, asking people questions about a couple of different core areas of their life, including income and time use and so forth. And one of the things that came up over and over again was just there was a lot of trash everywhere. And our Chinese students were kind of perplexed by this because in China, there are these kind of 3-wheeled tricycles that people in orange suits ride around in and sweep up all the trash. And so there's no trash anywhere in China usually. And so they're wondering, why is there trash everywhere in Ghana? And so it's not. They realized that the Ghanaian students, they weren't. When they asked them this question, it was sort of like, well, there's no place for it to go. No one is there to collect it. And then there were also, they noticed a couple of pits by the side of the road that were burning at times, and people were burning trash in some places. And wow, that's kind of unhealthy. Like, why are people burning trash? And it's like, well, when the Ghanaian students were posed this question by our Chinese change makers, their response was just, well, that's kind of the way it's always been done. And thinking about how what they could do, this was just an issue that they had observed, and the Ghanaian students recognized that it was an issue. It's something that our Chinese students were like, well, that they had asked was, well, do you enjoy living in an environment like this? Like, do you enjoy living, with trash everywhere? And the obvious answer was no. The Ghanaian students were like, obviously not. That's crazy. And so the business idea that they came up with was, we should. Here's the issue, right? There's trash everywhere. Start a waste management company. And the Ghanaian students and Chinese students worked on this idea together to produce an idea that eventually went on to win our competition and received praise from the Chinese embassy as well. It incorporated a couple of really, really cool ideas from both our Chinese and Ghanaian students working together. Part of it was an idea to use not trash trucks, but actually motorcycles or motorbikes to move the trash buckets around. Part of that was a cost-saving measure. Part of it was just because it's easier for motorbikes to get around rural areas in Ghana where the roads aren't necessarily as well maintained. From our Chinese side, one of their biggest contributions was a cost-saving measure to just the idea to rent equipment instead of buying trash compactors to cut capital costs at the beginning. So there were big contributions from both sides, and really I think it was one of the things that this did was it gave our Chinese students and Ghanaian students a chance to work together on an international team, which is something that domestically in China is not very common, and in Ghana in rural Ghana is certainly in that area had never really been seen before.
Listen, Francis,
so in terms of contributions,
you deserve an enormous amount of credit for what you've done as the co-founder of this. I mean, it's not easy, and I know these things are not. The morality, the ethics, the questions, all of those things are always there. But at the end of the day, you've done something that deserves an enormous amount of credit, and it's not easy. So I just, kudos, hats off, to you and what you guys have done.
Well, thank you.
Because I think it's really fantastic. Again, I'm always going to kind of tilt a little bit in favor of these kind of people from different cultures, particularly the Chinese and African sides getting together, and the Ghanaians kind of being exposed to Chinese culture, and the Chinese kind of getting exposed to some of the issues. It's just, I was just thinking the irony of, people from China kind of questioning about people who live in polluted environments. I mean, obviously China being one of the most polluted countries in the world. Right? I mean, kind of like the awareness on that one was just like, ooh, but okay. I mean, but nonetheless, again, it's all broadening of the horizons for everybody involved. So just very quickly before we go, if people want to find out more about your program, where can they go? If we have Chinese parents who are listening to this and they say, that's it for my little Xiaomei, where do they go to find out more?
They would be able to go visit our company's website, www.jq-edu.com. We also will be posting on our company's WeChat accounts.
Okay. AIC is one of those application consulting firms. It's also where Francis Miller is an education consultant based in Beijing and the co-founder of the China Ghana Changemaker Program. Really one of the first of the many, what I expect to be many, kind of study abroad as the Chinese now are diversifying their approach to applying for universities, but also probably because there is just a growing interest in studying international cultures in China, and something that I think is desperately needed just as it is in the United States. So, Francis, thank you so much for staying up late to join us on the show, and we wish you the best of luck with year 2 of your program.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
And for Cobus Van Staden, I'm Eric Olander, and we'll be back again very soon with another edition of the China in Africa podcast. Thank you so much for listening.
The discussion continues online. Head over to facebook.com/China Africa Project to share your thoughts on today's show, or follow China Africa News that's updated every 4 hours, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The guys are also on Twitter, where you can find Cobus at Stadenesque or Eric at E. Olander. That's EOLANDER. Subscribe to the China Africa podcast on iTunes or download the mobile apps for iOS, Android, or Windows Phone. Just head over to your favorite store and search for China Africa.